This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win.
President Joe Biden coming out of the gate firing at former President Donald Trump during his State of the Union address tonight. Biden referencing January 6th as he gears up for a potential showdown with Trump in the 2024 election. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Michelle Marsh.
And I'm Scott Thuman, live on Capitol Hill tonight. We've got team coverage for you this evening with highlights and reaction. We're going to start with national correspondent Christine Frizzell. She's got key points that were made tonight.
President Joe Biden making his pitch at a time improvements in the economy have not translated to a major rise in confidence from voters.
My inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world.
Donald Trump reacting in real time on Truth Social, including the rise in prices that have occurred since Biden took office. It was not a campaign speech, but this year's address started off with a focus on his opponent. President Joe Biden contrasting his views on Russia and Ukraine, abortion rights, and democracy, and former President Trump's role on January 6, 2021.
This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies.
President Biden also addressing the record numbers of migrants who have come into the country on his watch, insisting his plan to help has been blocked by Republicans, who blame Biden for upending policies they say worked. Many continue to talk about a 22-year-old woman recently murdered, the prime suspect, Jose Ibarra. He was in the country illegally.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand.
While President Biden was addressing the nation on live TV, House Republicans took to social media to counter what he was saying. Here's a look at just some of the posts shared on X. Senator Britt of Alabama was chosen to deliver the official GOP rebuttal to the president's address. She's trending at the moment. And Scott, Britt has an impressive background.
She does, and you're right, Michelle, trending, not always for the right reasons or the ones you'd want, because she's certainly getting quite a bit of attention, some of it negative for the performance that we just saw. Now, meanwhile, she is, as you pointed out, the youngest Republican woman elected to the chamber and the first from Alabama. And while having served for just over a year, she has a wealth of experience already, having worked as chief of staff to her predecessor, Senator Richard Shelby. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell calls her a, quote, unapologetic optimist and a leading voice. She hit the president on the economy and in particular the border.
But minutes after taking office, he suspended all deportations, he halted construction of the border wall, and he announced a plan to give amnesty to millions. We know that President Biden didn't just create this border crisis, he invited it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable.
In Christine's report, you heard the president name Lincoln Riley, the Georgia nursing student who was killed by a man in the country illegally, or at least those are the charges. He was actually heckled on that point, but not before he directly confronted Republicans over a bipartisan effort to boost funds for the border and its protection. That collapsed as senators prepared to vote.
In November, my team began serious negotiation with a bipartisan group of senators. The result was a bipartisan bill with the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, you don't like that bill, huh? That conservatives got together and said it was a good bill? I'll be darned. That's amazing.
So you saw the president there, a little bit of fire back, also some sarcasm. He was prepared for this criticism to come from the chamber. He also, by the way, unrelated, faced mounting pressure from within his own party. There is a vocal contingent urging him to call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. And he didn't go overboard on it. He did call for a temporary ceasefire, a 6-week-long one that he says would allow for hostage trading with prisoners and also to get more relief in. He also called for a temporary pier to be built by the U.S. military that would deliver aid directly to Gaza, although he said U.S. soldiers would not have boots on the ground. It was not, however, enough to assuage protesters who were outside the Capitol tonight. President Biden was reportedly late getting here to the Capitol tonight as Palestinian protesters blocked his departure from the White House and plenty of nearby roads as well.
And Scott, we were watching this here in the newsroom while you were at the Capitol. The protesters were calling for a ceasefire and for the U.S. to stop funding for Israel. Our Carl Willis was there.
With the backdrop of the Capitol here behind me, where the State of the Union took place, protesters took to the streets. Many of these roadways already blocked off for security reasons earlier. Those roadblocks started all the way back at Pennsylvania and 7th up to the Capitol. We're just a few blocks down where protesters stood in the roadways. And although they've called it a night here, as the president delivered his message on the State of the Union, they were hoping to get their message out as well. I talked to one protester who said he is opposed to what's happening in Gaza and also how the president has performed.
Of course, what's happening in Gaza is atrocious. It's horrific. And he's part of it. He's co-signing it with weapons and money. But he ran on progressive platform. He ran on tuition-free community college. Where's that? He ran on robust student loan forgiveness. Where's that? He ran on paid family leave, paid sick leave, universal child care. Where's that?
And although the protesters have gone for the night, they say their message and these demonstrations will not stop until there's a ceasefire. In Northwest D.C., Carl Willis, 7 News.
And our John Rogers continues our coverage on this protest. John, we know of at least one person who was arrested, but police say they weren't one of the demonstrators. What do we know about this man?
Yeah, so this person allegedly drove up to this group of protesters. So this is what we know, Michelle. A few hours ago, a man was booked on criminal charges, and our camera was rolling as this occurred. This was about 6 p.m. at 16th and H Streets Northwest. Our photojournalist said a car was stopped in the middle of the intersection at the edge of Lafayette Square, right in front of the group of protesters. And shortly after, a man started yelling at them. He was later arrested. You can see him right there in kind of the purple. As he was being escorted out, he yelled out that he had just turned 18. D.C. police, they have not told us much, but they did tell us that he's facing reckless driving charges. Thankfully, no injuries were reported. We'll be sure to let you know if there are any updates, Michelle.
And as you may have seen, many lawmakers using their wardrobe tonight to make major statements in the chamber. Some members were wearing blue to show support for the Israeli hostages taken after Hamas's October terror attack. Also, the House Democratic Women's Caucus wore all white, along with Fighting for Reproductive Freedom pins. And some Republicans, they were wearing pins that say her name, Laken Riley, in honor of the 22-year-old nursing student who police say was killed by an illegal Venezuelan migrant. There were many guests tonight. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine brought Elizabeth Carr. The Norfolk, Virginia native is the first person in the U.S. to be born through in vitro fertilization. Of course, this is timely in light of the Alabama Supreme Court's decision last month that led to restricted IVF access in Alabama. Here's what Kaine said about the recent attacks on IVF.
This is exactly what many of us predicted would happen when the Dobbs decision was rendered in the summer of 2022. And Alabama isn't the only state that is going down the path of legal definitions that threaten parents and threaten providers with serious consequences, including criminal prosecution.
Senator Kaine recently co-sponsored legislation to protect Americans' right to access IVF and other reproductive services. Scott.
Yeah, so quite the night, Michelle. Real briefly, I just spoke with Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, a big player here on Capitol Hill, a Democrat. He said the one thing that surprised him about Republicans tonight is that they really did sit on their hands, even when there were issues that typically unite the entire chamber. Even if you don't like the president, you're the opposite party, you would clap at. He says there was almost none of that tonight, except for the mention of the late John Lewis. Other than that, he says, really quiet. The entire State of the Union, you've got it on our website, WJLA.com. We encourage you to watch it there if you missed it tonight.